Marilyn, it's Rabbi Hal. I'm very sorry for your loss. I'm very sorry for your loss. He's still paying. All of you come stand over by the There's an idea in Judaism that we have enough to worry about and enough burdens to carry, and that only the immediate one is resolved. We have a lot of burdens so they can support you guys. Obviously, it feels a lot of everyone. I know from talking last night that he was a product because of that. So this is going to be our moment before we begin the service right here. And we're going to take a moment to say a blessing. At this point, we acknowledge that all of our lives are in God's hands. And we know that your brother was very righteous. That there's a special place set aside for him in heaven. And a prayer that we may only overlook it on time. So if you repeat after me the blessing, we'll say it in Hebrew first and then in English. Baruch, Atah, Adonai, Eloheinu, Melech, Ha'olam, Dayan, Ha'emet. Blessed are you, Lord our God, the judge of truth. Amen. Now, you want to put your just grab it on the bottom and there. I can help you to put the ground down.
About an inch and a half.
However far you put your foot up here. All of our hopes and our prayers that, of course, this symbolizes the empty space. There is an emptiness there. There's a fear in your hearts, in all of our hearts. The hope and prayer is over the next few days together as a family, over the next weeks and months, that all the memories, all the love, and all the stories that you hear from everyone else helps to fill that empty space with just incredible memories of your dad, of your brother,
מזמור לדוד, אדוני אלוהי לא יחסר, בינותיך יביצני, על מי מנוחות ינהלני. נפשי ישובב, ינחני במגלי צדק, למען שמו, גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות, לא ירא רע, כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך, המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי, דשנת בשם ראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני ליורך ימים.
As our cantor Shifman began our service chanting Psalm 23 in the Hebrew, I ask for you to join me in the English, "The Lord is my shepherd." The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Today we gather here to share words of praise, of thanks, of honor, and of love, as we recall with great affection a beloved husband, a beloved father, a beloved grandfather, a beloved great-grandfather, a beloved son, a beloved brother, a beloved uncle, a beloved physician, a beloved colleague, a beloved mentor, and beloved friend, Dr. Herbert Sidney Bell. Our Bible teaches us these words, "The kol zaman ve'et l'chal chefetz tachat hashamayim." A season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven. A time for planting and a time for reaping, a time for keeping and a time for discarding, a time for loving and a time for hating, a time for embracing and a time for refraining, a time for laughing and a time for weeping, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing, a time for dying, a time for speaking, a time for silence, a time for seeking, and a time for losing. Our beloved Herb has departed from this world. He leaves us with a good name, and he returns home in peace at the age of 92. Herb has left many in mourning, his beloved wife of 68 years, Marilyn, the love of his life, his 4 children and their spouses who became like his own children, Alan and Susan, Janie and Rick, Debbie and Craig and Nancy and Steve, the apples of his eye, his grandchildren, Amanda and Andrew, David, Kara and Chris, Lauren and Nick, Brian, Weston, Jenna, Jordan and Amanda, and Joshua and Cooper, and the diamonds in his crown, his great-grandchildren, Bryn, Blake, and Daniela, his sister and brother-in-law, Susan and Mark, and many nieces and nephews. Our beloved Herb now joins all those who have gone before, most especially his dear daughter-in-law, daughter-in-love Diane, of blessed memory. He joins his parents, Dr. Julius and Francis Ormanville. He joins them all in heaven. When I meet to prepare for a funeral with a family, for a funeral service, I always ask the same question to start off. I ask you, can you please describe your loved one in a word or a phrase. Well, last night when we met as a family, all squeezing into your parents' living room, we spent more than the first half hour just sharing with me all the qualities, all the words that came to mind when we think of Herb. Just sharing all those qualities of such a remarkable man. Though Herb was short in stature, he was larger in life than life. Though he was quiet, when he spoke, you made sure that you listened, for he was incredibly wise and intelligent. He only spoke when he had something to say. At our synagogue, B'nai Yeshurun, Herb is one of a handful of leaders that earned the title of Honorary Life Trustee. He most certainly was one of our most trusted leaders. He was a man who loved his timeshares because he loved sharing his time with you. Loyal and devoted, a man of service to his patients, his colleagues, his synagogue, and most importantly to you, his family. At this point, we have several tributes from the family. I'm going to first call upon his son, Alan.
Dad was a good man. Everyone here knows this is the case. He was a mensch who led by example. He was an inspiration to us, his children. He was intellectual, had many, many professional accomplishments. He displayed his love of Judaism by the way he lived, and by the way he dedicated time to his synagogue. And most of all, he loved Mom, and he loved his family and his extended family. When I think of my dad and I share my thoughts are similar to those of my sisters. The first thing I think of is that he was steady, remarkably steady. He was reliable. He was playful. He was witty. He was loving and kind. He was knowledgeable, always learning, warm, generous, good-natured, and strong-willed, very strong-willed. Despite that, he was diplomatic, encouraging, and supportive. He was, as the rabbi learned from us, and maybe from his own experience, a man of few words. When he did speak, I think people listened. He was humble. Nothing that he did was ever for show. He donated time to improving what was around him. He taught me and he taught my sisters by our having observed his work ethic and his ethics in general. Dad didn't like change. We used to go to Florida as a family in summers. We would go to Daytona Beach, drive there every summer, stay there for 2 to 3 weeks, and we would go to his favorite restaurant every other day, the whole time we were there. He loved to spend time with his family. He didn't do much with us. He just wanted us there while he watched TV and took naps. He loved the beach. He loved the pool. He loved playing with the children when they were young. And he was a wise counselor as we aged. He was humble in how he dressed. He would come home from work, stay in his work clothes, usually eat dinner, and sometimes he would take the dog out for a walk. Before he went out for the walk, he'd put on his bow tie and his overcoat, and he'd continue to wear his dress shoes and his suit, and he'd take the dog for a walk. You didn't have time to change. We always felt very high expectations from him. He was warm and caring to us. He was a reliable friend. He made friends with people for life. I never heard him say an unkind word about anybody. We saw how hard he worked at the work he thrived upon. We always felt his love. We always felt that he was there to counsel us. I detailed in his obituary his professional accomplishments, which were many. He was a leader of men. He finished his neurosurgical training, went into the Navy for 2 years, became the associate neurosurgical director at the Portsmouth, Virginia Naval Base Hospital. And his favorite story about his 2 years in the Navy related to the fact that the entire 2 years he never stepped foot on a boat. Until 2 weeks before discharge, when he made an error. There was a trip to Baltimore to visit my mom's family. And he got on a ferry across the Chesapeake. And he said, I should have taken the tunnel. He taught me never to say oops, but to say right. He said a doctor shouldn't say oops. As you can see, he was playful. One of my favorite events with Mom and Dad was a time when they came to visit us in Massachusetts. And they came to see us on Cape Cod. And there was a jazz concert going on for charity. There was a jazz harmonica player who was well known, yet I've forgotten his name. James Montgomery Blues Band. And Mom and Dad were interested in going. And they were in their mid-80s at the time. And they were the oldest people in the place. And when we got there, we walked down, and the only seats available were pretty much close to the front row. And James Montgomery would play his harmonica, and then he would sing. And Mom and Dad were holding hands in the front row and kind of grooving to the music a little bit. And James Montgomery was impressed, and he kept pointing to Dad. He kept pointing his finger at him. And then at the end of the set, he came over to shake his hand. And he seemed very, very pleased that this older gentleman was there and enjoying the event. My wife, Susan, was sitting with me, of course. And the woman behind her actually tapped her on the shoulder before James Montgomery did his pointing and said, do you see that couple in the front row? When I'm their age, this is who I want to be. And she said, those are my in-laws. Dad was a great man, a mensch, a great teacher, a great doctor, a great leader. He will always be with us. We will follow in his footsteps. We'll remember his warmth, his humor, his character, his loving devotion. We'll continue to model our lives after him. He lives through us. He lives on through us. His memory already is a blessing. We love him, and we'll never stop loving him.
Thank you, Alan. I now call up daughter Nancy.
This is a hard act to follow. My brother, like my father, knows how to speak in front of people. I'm not as good about it, but I'm going to do my best. And first, I want to thank you all for being here. It's so touching to see people from so many facets of his life here. And I want to thank Rabbi for last night, which was very healing for us. So thank you so much. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm the baby of the family. And my father always said, when he introduced me to people, this is my 16-year-old daughter, until I got married. Once I got married, I think he thought, well, a 16-year-old should not be married. So then he introduced me as, this is my baby daughter. So our dad was a remarkable man. Just read his obituary, and it is quite overwhelming, all of the good that he did in his life. The things he accomplished are incredible. But I want to talk mostly about how remarkable he was as a father, a grandfather, and a husband. When we were young, as Alan said, we went on summer vacations. Dad worked really hard. Being a neurosurgeon, he didn't have a lot of time, but he always took 6 weeks out of the summer, and we traveled together. And we have such precious memories of those times together. So Dad taught us about devotion, adoration of family, and dedication. D-A-D. Devotion, adoration, dedication. As kids, as we got older and had our own families, Dad made sure that everyone stayed close. And now with our larger family, we traveled again together every summer. We came from Boston, Columbus, Chicago, and New York to be together as our families grew. None of his children or grandchildren ever wanted to miss these times. And because of this, his grandchildren, who are now adults, really love each other. They have precious memories of the time together, and they look forward to being together whenever they can. And Dad never wanted to miss a family event. He went to every special event from all of our relatives. He always helped the family and friends whenever anyone was in need, because he wanted to celebrate the good times, but to be there for the challenging times as well. He was a guy people could trust and depend on. I think everybody in this room knows that about him. Dad gave his children opportunities to be a doctor, a physical therapist, an audiologist, and a social worker. He taught us to care about each other and for others. And he demonstrated a strong work ethic, as Alan said, which we have all carried with us in our lives, and we now see in our children. Dad accomplished so much, but he never brought attention to his accomplishments. Sometimes we found an article about him or learned about an honor about him just by accident, happening upon seeing the article in the house. It was never talked about. He was just that humble. And let's talk about the love he has for our mom. What an example of what love is. Together since they were 14 and 16 and married for 68 years. As Mom's memory faded, Dad's love and steadfast devotion never faltered. They still held hands, they still kissed on the cheek, they spent time together, and Dad was always there, loving Mom. We're sure he didn't want to leave her, but also sure he's watching over her and all of us. I felt especially close to Dad over the past few years when he needed some of the care he gave to us given back to him. I'm going to miss the special moments, but will carry them with me as I learn to live life without the physical presence of my father. I'll look up at the sky and know there are huge angel wings spread over all of us. We will love you forever, Dad, and miss you always. But we're so grateful for the life you led and the lessons you taught by your quiet yet very loud example. As I ended many calls with him, I love you, love you, love you, and blew him a kiss. We all love you, love you, love you, Dad.
Beautiful, Nancy. Thank you. And now, daughter Janie.
Along with everything that Alan and Nancy said, I wanted to make sure everyone knew that our father was very committed to Judaism. He was involved with the congregation. He served on many committees, and he was a board member for many years. He brought us up with an understanding of Jewish life, Jewish traditions, and Jewish values. I read an article about 8 of the Jewish values, and Dad included each value into his life. Tikkun olam, repair of the world. Dad did this professionally and personally, working hard to save lives and to be present and helpful to anyone in need. He practiced chesed, performing acts of loving kindness in small and big ways. He gave willingly of himself and gave to causes and organizations, thereby giving tzedakah. Dad understood the infinite worth of each human life and loved the uniqueness of each individual. He was thoughtful of the words he spoke most of the time, but mostly he was quiet. He was appreciative. He never engaged in gossip, and as we heard, he never spoke poorly of anyone, not even the telemarketers, and they called relentlessly. He taught us to care for all people, including strangers. So Dad kept kosher, Mom and Dad kept kosher, but they would eat out. And so I said to him, explain that to me. And he said, okay, every morning when I wake up and I make my first meal of the day, I have to think about which drawer to pull the silverware out of. And that reminds me from the beginning of the day that I am Jewish. So in all facets of life, Dad taught us a great deal. He led by example, and we will try to live life fully as he did, caring for family and friends and working to make the world a better place. I love you forever.
Beautiful. Thank you, Janie. And now we call up son in love, Steve.
Hi, everyone. Let me just start by saying that if you noticed, a lot of us are wearing bow ties tonight. And these are all Dad's bow ties that we all picked out for this occasion. We've been talking about greatness today, and there's a lot of greatness to have. He was a great doctor, a great family man, a great person. One thing he wasn't great at was golf. And let me be clear. Great is a strong word. Fair is another word. I'm talking below that. I can remember one time we were on the golf course, and it was a par 4, and he hit about 10 shots. He picked up his yellow ball because you couldn't see a white ball, and he said, not bad. And we said, well, you're getting your money's worth today, Dad. In his later years, in our last few years at Nag's Head, he couldn't play golf anymore, and he was kind of bored and lethargic at the house. And we said, what do you want to do, Dad? You're just sitting around. He goes, I want to play poker. We all looked at each other. Nobody had any cards. And then Cooper stands up and goes, oh, I have a full professional set of poker chips in my trunk. Who carries around a full set of poker chips and cards in their trunk? Thank you for that, Cooper. We had a fantastic night, and we all played poker, and Dad lit up as we did that. And we all know right now that it wasn't about the poker. It wasn't about the golf. It was about being together. And that's what counted. And we know right now he's hitting a hole in one, and he's got a straight royal flush. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And I think two of the grandchildren have a few remarks. Lauren?
Thank you all so much for being here today to honor and celebrate my remarkable and beloved grandfather and to help support my family. For those that don't know me, I'm Lauren, one of the granddaughters, Janie's daughter. So as part of my 7th grade English class, we had an assignment to write about our hero. Can you not hear me? How's that? All right, awesome. Okay, so as part of my 7th grade English class, we had an assignment to write about our hero, and it was a no-brainer for me. I instantly knew I'd be writing about my grandfather. We got to present our speeches during the class, and my grandparents traveled to Columbus to be there for it. I printed out a copy and framed it, which I have with me right now, meticulously decorated it with stickers. And since that time, he has kept it in his office from that moment on. And today I'm going to share that hero speech with you, as the words will always ring true. So what is a hero? To me, a hero is someone who you look up to and who teaches you things. A hero is someone you want to be like, someone you admire, and someone who is a terrific person. My grandfather fits those descriptions perfectly, and that is exactly why he's my hero. Throughout the years, my grandpa has taught me the value of time spent with family because he places a huge emphasis on family. My family resides in many states, and unfortunately, we don't get to see much of each other. So that we can get to know one another, my grandpa rents a house that's large enough to accommodate all 19 of us. There's a few more now. That way we can spend 2 weeks all together relaxing at the beach. Though he loves being with family, my grandpa also enjoyed his time spent at work. My grandpa retired a few years ago, and simply by knowing him, it was obvious how much he loved his job. He would never complain about getting up early to go to work or working long hours, and when weekends came around and he got paid to come into work and drop what he was doing, he still would never complain. He was a neurosurgeon for many years. The main reason he loved his job so much was because he truly wanted to save people's lives or improve upon their quality of life. He was willing to give up his personal time to attend work or a meeting, and he was involved in many medical committees, all to improve the quality of medical care. My grandpa was a well-respected doctor by both other doctors and his patients. Not only has my grandpa helped other people, but he has also helped me through the good times and the bad. When I was a baby, I had pyloric stenosis, and my grandpa contacted doctors to make sure everything necessary was being done for me. When my baby sister and my other grandfather died, my grandparents came down to help my family through the difficult time. My mom got sick, so they came down to help her get better and also to help my family. My baby brother was born, and my grandparents came down to see him and congratulate us. My grandpa has helped me in so many ways, but now he's helping himself. Recently, he's had health problems, and instead of letting his health issues have a negative effect on his life, he took action to improve his health. He's making lifestyle changes, which are challenging but necessary. I'm so proud of him for taking positive action because I want him to live a long and healthy life. I'm so lucky to have such a wonderful grandpa who has had such a positive impact on my life. He's enriched my life and has contributed so much to humanity. Grandpa, thank you so much for being there whenever I needed you, and thanks for always being my hero.
Thank you, Lauren. And Amanda, one final family tribute, granddaughter Amanda.
Hi, I'm Amanda, and I'm the firstborn grandchild and the daughter of Alan and Diane Bell. And unfortunately, my mom, Diane, passed away in 2009, but she did write this poem for my grandpa for his 65th birthday. And like Lauren, it had a spot framed in his office. So I'm going to read it. So, Ode to my father-in-law. I was the very first in-law kid. When I met Alan's parents, I practically hid. I was especially scared of Alan's dad, a big neurosurgeon and a Yankee. It could have been bad. But my fears were allayed on our first conversation, an interesting discourse on arteriovenous malformation. Our views on nutrition don't always concur, but we settle the matter over dessert. For his work and patience, he shows tireless devotion, but never neglects empathy and emotion. Innovator, researcher, leader is he. There's nothing this man cannot do or be. But the essence of Dad is closer at hand. First and foremost, he's a family man. I am so glad to call him my dad, the best father-in-law a girl ever had. I love you, Diane.
Thank you, Amanda, both for speaking and sharing your mom's words of blessed memory. Herb was a gute neshama, a good soul. Thoughtful and generous, always supportive, gentle, and quiet. He expected the best out of people. He could certainly be demanding and stubborn. He was strong, always the first to help anyone. Loyal, incredibly warm and caring. For all of his achievements, he always remained humble. He was young at heart. He lived life to the fullest. He had a wry sense of humor, a hopeless romantic. When Jordan and Amanda got married this past year, Grandpa Herb was there, of course. He spoke so eloquently at your wedding. You told me that you had confided in your grandfather that you were having a tough time during COVID. You were both working remotely, Zooming into work from your small living space, that you were on top of each other and you didn't know how you would deal with it. And your grandfather's answer was simply this. He always looked at the glass half full. He said, "This just means that you have more time together." That was Herb, always positive. He had a very special way about him, real gravitas. He garnered an unequal level of respect that was very well earned. Obviously, he was a preeminent neurosurgeon. You shared with me that how did he sort of deal with neurosurgery, where oftentimes we're dealing with very difficult cases where the outcomes were not always going to be good. And he said that at least he could do his best, and when he could save as many people as he could. You may have heard he never claimed to have ever made a mistake in life. He's famous, in fact, for never apologizing. He'd say, "I don't do things that I ever have to apologize for." It's a pretty good way to live life. You already know that he had a distinct signature style, his snazzy look, suspenders, and a bow tie, always ready to celebrate. He loved you. Born and raised in New York City, he graduated from the preeminent Stuyvesant High School. He attended Wagner College and after 3 years was admitted early to their medical school at Tulane. He graduated from Tulane as a physician at the age of 24, but that wasn't the most significant moment that happened that day. It was on that day when he graduated medical school that he married his beloved Marilyn. They met years ago when Herb was 16 and Marilyn was 14. Herb had much family in the Baltimore area, and oftentimes Herb and his sister Susan and their parents would go down to Baltimore to visit, especially their cousins. I hope we're going to tell the story right, Susan. You can correct me if I get it wrong. Herb had asked the family, the cousins, while he was down in Baltimore, if there was anyone around that he could go out with. This was when he was 16. He was a teenage boy and just wanted to go out with someone. It so happened that Marilyn's grandparents lived just a few houses down the street, and she had gone on a blind date earlier or the day before and was not so happy with the outcome of that date, and so she was just at her grandparents' home. Well, the family gave Herb the number, and he called over to Marilyn's home and asked her. He introduced himself and asked if she wanted to go out, and her answer was no. She wasn't interested at the time after that bad experience of the day before, the night before. She wasn't interested in meeting anyone right now. Well, little did she know that Herb was only about a few houses away. He walked over to the house. He knocked on the door. He introduced himself. He said, let me get the quote here, if we remember it right. "I'm Herb and I want to go out with you." You have to know that Marilyn was wearing rollers in her hair. She was not prepared to meet anyone. She didn't know that this person, Herb, who had called before, was 3 houses away. Well, as we say, the rest is history. They never spent a New Year's apart. They were so young, their family wouldn't let them get married. Herb's parents, in fact, made him wait until he graduated medical school, more than 8 years later. And that's why they get married on the same day that he graduated medical school. And during those 8 years in between, mostly long distance, the story goes that they both did a little bit of dating on the side. Marilyn went out only on one-time dates, and she usually made her dates take her to the post office so she could mail packages to Herb. And if Herb had come down to Baltimore for the weekend and she had already had a date on the calendar with somebody else, she made sure to set up Herb with one of her girlfriends that were the least attractive. You already heard they were truly in love until the end, always seeing them holding hands, hopeless romantics, an incredible model of loyalty, love, and devotion. Mom would tell the story that all the boys she dated would profess their love to her on that one and only date. She never really understood why, but she said that Dad didn't say I love you until he meant it, and then it was forever. And it really was. He'd always give credit to Marilyn for all that he accomplished and for all the raising of the family. He taught her how to cook, the story goes. But years later, if she was out of town, he'd call and say, "I cooked a steak and started a fire." Marilyn would answer on the phone, "Are you calling me to tell me that you want me to come home or you need me to come home?" And throughout all of Marilyn's difficulties, Herb was always there, the most incredible, patient, caring, and loving partner. Susan, you shared with me that he was the best brother, really like a father to you. You shared how incredibly supportive he was, that he even cooked for you too while growing up, but you said that at some point he said, "Now it's on you. You got to take over to do this." And when you were ordained as a cantor, your brother could not have been prouder. And you and Mark and Herb and Marilyn had many special experiences together. You shared one, that trip to England, among so many times of being together. And Susan, your brother had a very special name for you. You were his itty-bitty baby sister. It was a term of endearment that he truly meant. The best father, you already heard, always supportive, always there, even in the middle of surgery. If you needed him, you called him. He found a way to get back to you. He was a little bit demanding. If you brought home a report card with good grades, he'd say, "Not bad." If you got all A's, he'd ask if you could have done any better. But when he knew you gave it your best, he'd tell you that he was very proud of you. When Dad gave his approval, you knew that he meant it. All of your friends from growing up looked up to your father, and many of them considered him like a second father. You already heard the best grandfather, so supportive, accepting, non-judgmental, always there wanting to be a central point in your lives, and he was. Of course, he wanted many of you to be a doctor and carry on the family legacy, but he was so happy for whatever and whoever you chose in life. And how delighted in the blessing to be a great-grandfather. I'm not going to go through the medical training, which I know the family shared online. You can read it. Please read it in the notice. His incredible, not just education, but his innovations, literally life-saving. We believe it. But I want to share one note that was on the website where friends could offer messages to the family. And this is from Dr. Teresa Rausch. This is what she wrote on the website. Dr. Bell was my mentor, my neurosurgical partner in Northeastern Ohio Neurosurgical Associates for many years. A brilliant man and a man that dared to take a woman into his practice when there were very few. Dr. Bell was well loved by all patients, doctors, and nurses, and always had wonderful, detailed stories to tell all who would listen. He was a man who could find the good in every person and every bad situation, even after retired from practice. My family and I will miss him, as he was important to all of us during my practice days and a guide as how to be a compassionate doctor. I want to add that the family shared with me that your dad was colorblind. He actually said that it heightened his senses, and during surgeries he could somehow sense what was happening with blood flow and the brain and leakages. He could sense very subtle changes even before any of the machines or anyone else was aware of them. And even after retirement, he kept up on the latest innovations and research. He's still attending conferences, always learning and taking on any new technology. You know, Cantor Schiffman and I, as well as Rabbi Weiss, we loved your dad. We're so appreciative of his leadership, his friendship, and his wise counsel that he provided to us in all our years. I've been here 21 years, Cantor Schiffman 24 years. We oftentimes leaned upon him and appreciate all that he did for us and for our congregation. He won the highest award in our congregation, the Joseph P. Lomberg Award, in 1986. And in 1995, your parents were honored at our annual tribute dinner. Really stellar leaders in our congregation. He was a proud man. He never boasted once about his own accomplishments, though he could have, as you said. He'd say, I don't think you should talk about yourself. Let others do that for you. But he was so incredibly proud of you. That's the only thing he could boast about. Herb devoted his life to caring for others and for all of you, spending more than 75 years of his life with his beloved Marilyn. In Herb's last moments, he sat on the bed next to Marilyn. He stroked her hair. He told her he loved her, kissed her, and then he took his last breath. Herb will be missed by family and friends. He's returned home in peace. We can rejoice in his love and his spirit. We can surely say that he's at peace. May his name only bring blessings, and we say, Amen. If you're able to, please rise. Call up Cantor Schiffman again to recite the El Male Memorial Prayer.
El Male Rachamim Shochein Bameromim Hametzei Menucha Nechona Tachad Kanfei HaShechina B'malon Kedoshim Tohorim Kezohar Arakim Azirim Et Nishmat Simcha Hirsch Bat Yehuda V'Feger Ezel Shalach Le'olamo Began Eden Tehei Menuchato Hanam Bal HaRachamim Hastirei U'Besedek Nafecha Le'olamim U'Tzaror Bar bitzror chayim et nishmatom. Adonai hu nachalatom. V'yanuach b'shalom ishkavom. V'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo. V'nomar amen.
El Mari Rachamim, exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure, to the soul of our beloved Dr. Herbert Sidney Bill, who has gone to his eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May he merit the reward for living a life filled with righteousness, kindness, and love. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace. And we say, Amen. Please be seated. In a moment, we'll continue with burial at Chesterland Memorial Park, B'nai Yeshurun Cemetery in Chesterland. There will be a virtual Shiva tomorrow evening, Thursday at 7 p.m. Information and the link to the virtual Shiva can be found on the Berkowitz-Kumin website. Family asks you to please join there or to send condolences. You can write condolences on the website there. The family has asked those who would like to contribute a tzedakah in Herb's memory can be done so to B'nai Yeshurun Congregation, the American Cancer Society, or the Alzheimer's Association.
Any of you who may have been asked to be pallbearers or wish to be pallbearers, we kindly step forward at this time.
Today